Have you ever finished a completely normal month, nothing fancy, nothing reckless, and still felt that quiet panic in your chest when you check your bank account? You know the one. Groceries, gas, maybe a couple drive-through meals because it was a long week, rent or the mortgage came out, a few subscriptions you forgot were even there. And you're sitting there doing the mental math again, thinking that doesn't add up. You didn't book a vacation, you didn't buy a TV, you didn't do anything wild, and yet somehow the money just evaporated. And then your brain does that thing, right? You start comparing. Am I behind? Are other people just better at this? Did I miss some rule everyone else knows? Because let's face it, it feels like everyone else is moving forward and you're stuck running in place. You see the Instagram posts, the new cars in the parking lot, the friends are buying houses, and you're wondering what you're doing wrong. And here's the part nobody really tells you. It's not that you're irresponsible, it's not that you just need a better budget, it's that there's a silent money trap baked into the system that quietly keeps the middle class stuck even when they do everything right. Welcome to Ben's Money Milestones, where late starters build real wealth. And look, just quickly before we get into this, let's be clear about what we're actually talking about today. This isn't a rant about lattes. This isn't hustle culture. This isn't if you just tried harder. This is about a structural trap that most smart, hardworking people fall into without ever realizing it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Okay, so let's talk about the trap itself, because on paper, the middle-class formula still looks fine. You get a job, you get paid, you pay your bills, you save a little, you invest in your 401k, you wait. That's the story, right? And honestly, that used to work. But here's where it quietly breaks. The system you're operating in today was designed for a totally different economic era. Different prices, different risks, different assumptions. And the math doesn't care that no one updated the rules. Think about it this way. The advice your parents got in the 1980s and 90s was built for a world where a college degree cost $15,000 total, a starter home was 2.5 times your annual salary, and healthcare was mostly covered by your employer. None of that is true anymore. But the advice stayed the same. Let me put some actual numbers on this. In 1980, median rent consumed about 16% of median income. Today, it's closer to 30% in most markets, and over 40% in cities where jobs actually exist. College costs have increased at more than double the rate of inflation. The average student loan debt has tripled in real terms over the past 30 years. Healthcare deductibles that barely existed a generation ago now routinely hit $5,000 or $10,000 for a family. Meanwhile, wage growth, essentially flat when adjusted for inflation. The median household income in 1980, adjusted for inflation, was about $63,900. Today, it's around $75,000. So yeah, it's higher, but not remotely close to matching the explosion in non-negotiable costs. We're earning 20% more and paying 100% more for the basics. And here's the kicker. Productivity has skyrocketed. American workers produce way more value per hour than we did in 1980, but almost none of those gains went to the middle class. They went to shareholders, executives, and asset owners. This isn't a political statement, it's just math. The deal changed, and nobody sent a memo. Most middle-class households in the US live in what looks like stability from the outside. There's income coming in, bills are paid, credit cards aren't maxed out, retirement contributions are happening, but almost all of that money is already spoken for. It's locked into fixed costs that must be paid every single month. Housing, transportation, healthcare, childcare, debt. And what's left over, the part that actually gives you options, is razor thin. According to the Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency with cash, not because they're financially illiterate, but because the margin between income and obligations has been squeezed down to almost nothing. The buffer that used to exist, it's gone. Let me give you a real example. Meet Jason and Emily. They're both 34, one kid, suburban house outside a mid-cost metro area. Combined household income about $92,000. That's basically average for a two-income household. After taxes, health insurance premiums, and payroll deductions, they take home around $5,800 a month. The mortgage is $2,100, property taxes and insurance averaged out another $450, one car payment $420, insurance on both cars $260, gas $200, childcare $1,100, groceries $750, utilities and phones $380, student loans $320. We haven't even touched clothes, medical copays, birthday gifts, home repairs, or the random stuff that always shows up. On paper, they're doing fine. In real life, they're one broken transmission or medical bill away from stress mode. And this is the trap. They're not broke, but they're not free either. Here's what it actually feels like living here. You're constantly scanning for small expenses. You hesitate before buying things that shouldn't feel like big decisions. A $30 shirt becomes a negotiation with yourself. Replacing worn-out shoes gets delayed another month. You say things like, "We'll wait until next month," even though next month looks exactly the same. Vacations go on the credit card, emergencies turn into debt, and saving feels like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. That constant low-grade anxiety, that's not a weakness. That's what happens when all your money is committed before it even hits your account. It's like running on a treadmill that speeds up every time you get your footing. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most financial advice completely misses this because it focuses on rates instead of liquidity. It tells you to maximize your 401k match, invest for the long term, and ignore short-term discomfort. And don't get me wrong, investing matters. Compound interest is real. Tax advantages are valuable. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Money that you can't access doesn't reduce stress. It doesn't give you options. It doesn't protect you from emergencies today. So people end up wealthy on paper and fragile in real life. They have retirement accounts they can't touch with penalties. They have equity in a home they can't sell. They have assets that look good in a spreadsheet and zero margin in their checking account. This is what I call being equity rich but option poor. You might have a growing retirement balance, you might have home equity, but none of that helps when the car breaks down on Tuesday and rent is due Friday. The system quietly nudges you into locking your money away while your day-to-day risk keeps rising. It's a terrible trade-off, but it's presented as responsible financial planning. And here's where the trap tightens, because when you're operating without a cash buffer, your behavior changes in ways that compound the problem. You choose safer jobs over better ones. You avoid risks that could actually improve your situation. You stay longer in unhealthy work environments because missing one paycheck would be catastrophic. Survival mode isn't just stressful, it's expensive. You pay higher interest, you miss opportunities, you make short-term decisions that look irrational from the outside, but make perfect sense when you zoom in. Taking a payday loan at 400% APR makes no sense until you realize the alternative is getting evicted. Staying in a dead-end job makes no sense until you realize you can't afford 3 weeks without income to job search properly. Let's look at another example. Meet Sarah. She's 29, single, renting in Columbus, Ohio. She makes $52,000 a year. That's basically median for her age and location. After taxes, she brings home about $3,400 a month. Rent is $1,250, car payment and insurance $480, gas $150, student loans $290, groceries $400, utilities and phones $220, health insurance premium is already taken out of her paycheck, but her deductible is $3,500. She saves $200 a month on a good month. She's not reckless, she's not irresponsible, she doesn't have a shopping problem, she packs lunch most days, she doesn't have expensive hobbies. She's tired. And the trap here is subtle, because from the outside, Sarah looks stable. She's employed, she's paying her bills, she's even saving a little. But she's one urgent care visit away from draining her savings and sliding backward. And here's what that means psychologically. Sarah can't think about career pivots or entrepreneurship. She can't take unpaid internships that might lead somewhere better. She can't move to a city with more opportunities because moving costs money she doesn't have. The lack of liquidity doesn't just limit her options today, it limits her trajectory for years. But it goes deeper than missed opportunities. Research from Princeton and Harvard found that financial scarcity literally reduces cognitive bandwidth. When you're worried about money, you perform worse on cognitive tests, not because you're less intelligent, but because part of your brain is always running calculations in the background. Should I buy the cheaper shoes that'll wear out faster? Can I afford to go to that wedding? Financial stress correlates with worse health outcomes, higher rates of anxiety and depression, and impaired decision-making. It's not just uncomfortable. It's systematically degrading your ability to escape the situation causing it. And nobody talks about the shame. Our culture treats financial struggle as personal failing, so you don't ask for help. You pretend everything's fine while drowning behind the scenes. That isolation makes it worse because you think you're the only one. You're not. Now, here's the myth that keeps people stuck. The myth is that this stress means you're bad with money. That if you just optimized harder, tracked every dollar, or skipped a few more pleasures, you'd break free. And look, there are always small optimizations you can make, but the reality is much simpler and much harsher. The fixed costs of modern middle-class life have grown faster than incomes for decades. Housing alone has exploded relative to wages. In 1980, the median home price was roughly 3.5 times the median household income. Today, it's over 5 times, and in many metro areas, it's 7 or 8 times. Healthcare costs shifted risk onto individuals through high-deductible plans. Transportation became mandatory and expensive in sprawling suburbs with no public transit, and the system normalized living with almost no margin. This is the silent trap. Not poverty, not wealth, just enough income to qualify for everything and not enough slack to escape anything. You make too much for assistance, but not enough for comfort. You're caught in the middle with no safety net below and no ladder up. Now, most people don't realize how powerful even small milestones are in breaking this cycle, because milestones aren't about net worth, they're about behavior. They're about what money allows you to do and feel, and this is where the game actually changes. That first $1,000 in savings, that's not wealth, that's stability. It's the moment where a flat tire doesn't turn into a crisis, where an unexpected medical bill doesn't mean choosing between groceries and rent. The stress doesn't disappear, but it stops being constant white noise in your head. At $5,000, a breathing room appears. Decisions slow down. You stop making panicked choices. You can wait a day before committing to something. You can sleep on it. That matters more than people realize because rushed decisions made under pressure are almost always more expensive. At $10,000, options start to show up. You can say no, you can wait, you can negotiate from a position that isn't desperate. If your boss is unreasonable, you have a few months to find something better. If your apartment complex raises rent aggressively, you can move without destroying your finances. $10,000 isn't rich, but it's the difference between being trapped and having agency. It changes what you're willing to tolerate. With no savings, you accept things you shouldn't have to accept, but at this level, you can stand up for yourself. At $25,000 in liquid savings, you exit constant defense mode. That's when money stops yelling at you every day. That's when you can start thinking about offense, career moves, skill development, calculated risks. You're not wealthy, but you're free enough to build something. This represents roughly 6 months of essential expenses, 6 months of runway to find the right job instead of the first job, to try something entrepreneurial, or to recover from a health crisis without financial ruin. And here's the wild part. Most Americans never reach those levels. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't understand compound interest, but because the system constantly pulls money forward into obligations before people ever get there. Retirement accounts, mortgages, debt payments. The structure rewards long-term compliance while punishing short-term vulnerability. The financial industry loves this setup, by the way, because it creates a captive audience. People locked into 30-year mortgages, people whose retirement is tied to managed accounts with fees, people who need to borrow for every disruption. It's not a conspiracy, it's just an incentive, and the incentives don't align with your day-to-day stability. So when people say, I make more money but feel just as stressed, this is why. More income often just means bigger fixed costs. Better apartment, better car, better insurance plan, better neighborhood with better schools. And suddenly you're earning $110,000 instead of $70,000, and you're no freer. The trap scales with you. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's real, but it's also not entirely voluntary. Because the things that inflate aren't luxuries. It's childcare in a safe neighborhood. It's a reliable car that won't break down on your commute. It's health insurance that actually covers something. These aren't indulgences. They're the minimum requirements of middle-class stability, and they cost more every year. At the end of the day, this isn't about discipline. It's about math, incentives, and timing. The system assumes smooth income, low volatility, and predictable expenses. Real life doesn't work that way. Real life has layoffs, medical issues, car accidents, aging parents, and 1,000 other variables that don't fit into a spreadsheet. And until you build liquidity, real, boring, accessible cash, the trap stays closed around you. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because the structure is designed to keep you moving without ever giving you solid ground. So let's wrap this up. The silent money trap keeping the middle class stuck isn't spending too much on coffee. It's living in a system where fixed costs eat flexibility, where savings are delayed in favor of locked-away retirement funds, and where people are told they're failing when the structure itself is outdated. You're not broken. You're responding rationally to pressure. You're making the best decisions you can with the options you have. And the fact that it still feels hard, that's not evidence of personal failure. That's evidence that something bigger is off. The bottom line is this: clarity is power. When you understand why this feels so hard, you stop blaming yourself and start making smarter, calmer decisions. Not perfect ones, just better ones, strategic ones. Decisions that prioritize your breathing room over someone else's timeline. Because here's what changes when you see the trap. You stop playing by rules that were designed to keep you stuck. You start asking different questions. Not how do I maximize my 401k, but how do I build enough cash to have options? Not how do I afford a bigger house, but how do I reduce my fixed costs so I have room to breathe? These aren't failures. They're strategic choices made with clear eyes about what you're actually trying to accomplish. And look, I'm not saying don't invest for retirement. I'm not saying don't buy a house eventually. I'm saying build the foundation first. Build a buffer that lets you survive the inevitable shocks. Build the liquidity that gives you options. Because the system will always be there, ready to lock your money away for 30 years. But your crisis won't wait 30 years. Your opportunity won't wait 30 years. The path forward isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. It means going against what financial institutions tell you to do. It means prioritizing boring cash in a savings account over optimized returns. It means accepting that you're playing a different game than your parents played, and the old rules don't work anymore. And once you cross that first real liquidity milestone, the entire game changes, quietly, gradually, but permanently. The stress doesn't disappear, but it transforms from constant crisis into manageable challenge. And that shift, that's worth more than any rate of return. Take care, my friend. We'll talk soon.